I was just saying backstage, if Hillary Clinton was here, we'd have a set. But what do you think about the role of women? Obviously, the Planned Parenthood thing on an international level.
But we first have to tell you about our own person.
Okay, all right.
We're going to channel Viola for a minute and tell you our story.
Exactly.
And it isn't our story, not just of my story.
People will be really surprised.
All right, okay.
So I already mentioned my father, and my father came to the United States and defected and asked for political asylum. And at that stage, the Rockefeller Foundation was finding jobs for Central European intellectuals, and so they found him a job at the University of Denver. We had no idea where Denver was. My parents started driving across America. My mother said, we must be going the wrong direction because we're not going up, even though they say it's the mile-high city. So anyway, we settled there. My father became a professor, and ultimately he became dean of the Graduate School of International Affairs. And he died in 1977, and by then he was a pretty big deal in Denver, and there were lots of flowers and tributes at his funeral. And among them was this ceramic pot in the shape of a piano with some leaves in it. So I said to my mother, where did this come from? And she said, it's from your father's favorite student, Condoleezza Rice.
Wow.
And so what happened was Condoleezza was a music major. Hence the piano, and your family was associated with the university. So you can tell the rest of it.
So it's actually Dr. Corbell who rescued this failed piano major, because I realized I was going to end up teaching 13-year-olds to murder Beethoven, decided to find another major, and wandered into his course in international politics. So I was in my hotel room in Washington. I was visiting Washington. I get a call from Madeline, who I had known only through her father. She was working for the campaign of Michael Dukakis.
We have to tell an in-between part.
Yeah.
Which is you got your master's.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I got my master's and
Notre
at
Dame.
Notre Dame, came back, and I was wandering the halls of
You were
Denver.
writing your dissertation.
No, let me tell my part. I was wandering the halls,
I'm totally envisioning a
looking
reality.
for something to do, and I ran into Dr. Corbell, who said, you should do a PhD because you would be a great professor. And I thought, I don't want to be a professor, but went to the PhD program, and he was my doctoral advisor until his death. And that's when I sent the flowers. Now you can do the Dukakis.
Hotel
I did not know.
Dukakis Hotel room.
Okay, so what happened, I was working for Michael Dukakis, finding foreign policy advisors for him, and I had heard about this woman, Condoleezza Rice, who was then a professor, woman, teaching, and I thought, perfect. So I call her up and I say, this is what I'm doing, and you?
I say, Madeline, there's only one problem. I'm a Republican.
Oh. And I said, Condi, how could you be? We had the same father. But I have to say the following thing. Condi is a completely brilliant professor and a public servant. And what happened was I was Secretary of State when she was named National Security Advisor. And I had already seen what it was like to be a woman in a completely male world and trying to figure out how you operate, and especially if you've been given a job which is higher than theirs. And so when I became Secretary of State, there were people who thought, you know, how did she get to be Secretary of State when I should be Secretary of State? So what happened during that transition period, which is a really important time, Condi, we met at the State Department, and we had a conversation about what it was really like to be part of a system where women were the anomaly, not the regular aspect of it, and how to operate. She had, in many ways, a much harder job than mine, because being National Security Advisor, your job is to coordinate all these people. Imagine coordinating Rumsfeld and Cheney. You know. But we did develop a friendship, and it's continued to this day. Yeah.
So how did you coordinate Rumsfeld?
I had the president. But no, Madeline is right. Let me speak to the question about women. And I'm asked very often by young women in particular, how do I get to do what you did? And I do say you start as a failed piano major. And I say that because you first have to find something you're passionate about. Right. And I'm fortunate that I found my passion in things, so thanks really to Dr. Corbell. Secondly, you can't have anyone else tell you what your passion is. There is no earthly reason that a black woman from Birmingham, Alabama ought to want to be a Soviet specialist.
No.
But it was my passion. And so don't let people look at you and tell you what you ought to be interested in. I think sometimes that's why we have so few women in STEM, because they don't look like they ought to be interested in math and engineering, and so don't be put off by that. You have to be hyper-prepared. I grew up in Jim Crow, Birmingham, Alabama. And my parents were very clear. You have to be twice as good, they said. They didn't say it as a matter of debate. They said, that will give you armor, be twice as good. Now, if you work to be twice as good, you'll be confident. And then you have to say to yourself, I'm not going to let anybody else control this narrative. I'm not going to be anybody's victim, because the minute I'm somebody's victim, now they're in control, not me. And oh, by the way, many times in my life, I have turned to people and said, do you have a problem with me? Because I don't believe that I believe that I can handle almost any situation. But sometimes you need mentors and you need role models to help you navigate. And here, I really want to take on an important shibboleth out there. It is great if you can find a role model or a mentor who looks like you. But had I been waiting for a black female Soviet specialist role model, I'd still be waiting.
Yeah, I think you're it.
Yeah, my role models and my mentors were actually white men. Mostly they were old white men. They dominated in the field, like Joseph Corbell, like Brent Scowcroft. And so look for your role models and your mentors as people who will advocate for you, people that you admire and respect, and you'll get the mentorship.
Malin, what do you think?
Well, I fully agree, because you can't always find the person that looks exactly like you, and you may not be learning from that. And so you need somebody that truly believes in you and that can look at you and say, I do see that in you. But I do think we have to help each other. I wish that women helped each other more.
Well, I remember that quote.
Yes.
Do you regret saying that?
No. And let me just say this. I have been saying,
quote where you
this
said
is, well,
special place.
I have said this over and over again, that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.
Right.
I have said that for the last 25 years.
Right.
And it came out of my own life, frankly, because we do something that we shouldn't to each other. Women are very judgmental of each other. So when I started, I was 22, I had my children at 24, and I got bored. I wanted to go back to graduate school. And the people that criticized me the most were other women, saying, why aren't you in the carpool line instead of in the library? Or they would really say, my hollandaise sauce is so much better than yours, or whatever, and constantly putting me down. And then when I was working for Geraldine Ferraro as her foreign policy person, we were traveling around, and a housewife in Nebraska would say, well, how can she deal with Russians? I can't deal with Russians. Well, nobody was asking her to deal with Russians. We have this kind of way of projecting our own weaknesses onto other women. And so there either is that or what I call the queen bee complex. If there's only one job at the top, it's going to be mine and not yours. What I had always wished was that there was another woman in the room, so that when I was in the Principals Committee meeting at the National Security Council, that I could say, I wish we'd been there at the same time, as Condi said, instead of the man saying, as Sandy said, because they do that to each other. So I do think women need to help each other. By the way, what happened when I said that in New Hampshire, and people started applauding. I was with Hillary, and they didn't hear what my next line was, which is, therefore, you are going to the other place because of everything you've done for women. So that line was taken out of context. I do not regret saying it over the 25 years. I regret that it had something to do with voting, because I would never vote for Sarah Palin.
Okay.
All right, last
You have a book coming out. Explain it really quickly. What do you do? You teach?
I'm a professor.
Right. Okay.
Full-time professor at Stanford. I also run a little global consulting firm with Steve Hadley, Bob Gates, and Anya Manuel. I just finished a book on democracy called Stories on the Long Road to Freedom, because I believe strongly that we need to advocate for people who are still seeking the freedoms we enjoy. I practice the piano, and I will play a concert in June, and I will play in the National Pro-Am, AT&T National Pro-Am at Pebble Beach in golf next week.
You're a big golfer.
In many ways, I feel that one of the things I enjoy most is working with K-12 education reform. I'm on the national board of the Boys and Girls Clubs, and working to bring bring high quality after school and summer programs to kids who don't have them. If I could just say one other thing, though, it's also really important, as Madeline said, to help other women. It's also really important to get out and help people who have less than you do. We're becoming an incredibly aggrieved and entitled society, where we're so focused on whatever slights and problems we face.
Yeah.
When you go out there and you look at some of the children and what they're going through, it will never allow you to be either aggrieved or entitled again. You'll ask not, why don't I have? You'll ask, why do I have so much? And it's a much healthier way to live.
I do hear you're a kick-ass golfer, everybody. And
We're going to find out next week.
and for that one, I do learn social media. So it's a quick, twitchy reaction.
Well, I'm doing a number of different things too. I do teach at Georgetown. I do have a company, and I do an awful lot of traveling. I am chairman of the board of an organization called the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs that does democracy work abroad. And I'm chairman of the Truman Foundation that does, in fact, help students to get college education. And I do think, I so agree with Condi in terms of us thinking about people, the new generation that we need to help and not just be aggrieved, that we really have a lot to do. I do think, and it's always been my cause to talk about those that want to come to America. And I am concerned about what is happening on the refugee and immigrant issue. This is personal, but a refugee immigrant trained 2 women secretaries of state. And I do think it's an example of what can happen. My father, again, used to say, there is nothing better than to be a professor in a free country. And I do think that this country is based on the diversity of us coming together and being able then to help people in other parts of the world. And people ask about my pins today, and I have my Statue of Liberty pin. That is what America's about.
A refugee started Google, an immigrant runs Microsoft, an immigrant runs Google, the one section of Google. Steve Jobs' father was a refugee from Syria, which is really interesting.
Well,
Start to think about it.
And let's remember that with the exception of Native Americans, we all are. But some of us many of our ancestors came in chains, but almost everybody came from someplace else.
Right. Well, that famous Martin Luther King quote that Tim Cook used in the thing, we all came in different boats, but we're all in the same one now, which I think was great. Great public servants, great women. Give them a